Talking about
Penis
sex.
goes in there.
Subversive idea.
And it warms up.
Talking about sex on Hack.
Hello, Tom Tilley with you for the final episode of Hack, where this week we have had one thing on our minds. And I don't need to tell you what that is. I guess it's actually in the bed track underneath me right now. So many of the topics we've covered this week have been easy to talk about on the radio, but not so easy when you're actually in the heat of the moment. Like, for example, negotiating bad sexual chemistry or bringing up safe sex with someone who clearly doesn't care about it, which can be a bit awkward. But I guess these issues, if we were able to talk about them more easily, we'd solve a few problems. We might have less STIs, less relationship breakdowns, and less anxiety all round when it comes to sex. The benefits are there, right? It's pretty obvious. But it's not that easy, is it? Well, we'll find out today as we round out Sex Week on Hack. And hanging out with you in the studio for today's look back at the week on sex is Ben Law. He's the author of two books, one looking at gay culture in Asia called Geisha. Now, Ben, is it more awkward to talk about sex in China than Australia?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a particularly taboo topic in a lot of Asian countries, actually. It changes, though. Like, there are some... I don't know, like, for instance, in China, homosexuality is not a problem as in it's hated, as in homophobia here, but it's just not talked about to the extent that people don't even know they exist.
Very interesting, because it's one of the most taboo topics, especially for straight guys dabbling in gay sex, which we talked about earlier in the week. Our other guest is Sanz, who's no stranger to the shake-up. She's a comedian and a rom-com writer who is famous for saying things like this on Hack.
Fundamental things, like, does my woman come with a cow? That's why I can't get married. I don't have a cow.
Yeah, that's a real shame. I'll go to Hans.
I don't produce dairy.
Don't produce dairy, Lou. Thank you so much for bringing that to Hack a few months ago. Unbelievable. Do you think you'll have trouble topping that today?
No, I'm currently not getting any, so I'm really looking
really angsty
at this as a bit of a release.
Hello.
So, yeah, I've got a lot to say. Hey, Ben. How you going?
Good.
Awesome
you
to have
sound
you.
good.
Oh, Jesus, Lou, just
It's already
hold on.
started.
You're a freak. All right, now let's look back at the week. John Barrington brings us some of the conversations that were pretty easy to have on the radio, not too easy, but much harder to have in real life.
Have you ever fallen in sex, not love? That's what we asked you on Monday.
Felt like love because it felt like the most intense pleasure and connection that was possible.
Kelly, not a real name, brought you her purely sexual relationship with a younger man, but their personality differences eventually got in the way.
This was a year ago, and to this day I still want to ring him and say, you sure you don't want to come over one more time?
Sarah called in to say she was about to break up with her husband of 3 years because the lack of sexual chemistry made her sleep with another guy.
The spark just died, and emotionally and intellectually we still connect, which is the really hard thing. And I feel with this other guy it's mainly a physical thing that's been missing in my life.
I want to see numbers in action.
Tuesday was all about the count. You heard Tom Tilley's interviews at the Laneway Festival, where lots of women said they'd lie about the number of people they'd slept with.
What would your friends consider slutty?
They'd probably say over 5.
So what do you say?
I would say 3.
But how many people have you slept with?
I'd rather not say.
We also explored the double standard, where guys don't have to lie and still won't be considered sluts. For Wednesday's show, Tom Tilley and Louis McCurdy put the call out for guys who were
heteroflexible.
Yeah, so you toss it around a bit.
Yeah, but we love to toss it around a bit.
Come on, Tom Tilley. Sex week. This is serious.
Oh, my goodness.
Straight guys dabbling in gay sex, like 28-year-old Drew.
I kind of just blurt it out. I want to try a cock.
After experimenting in anal play with his girlfriend, he had sex with his male housemate. Rizzo also called in with his story.
All our friends used to make out that we were too close and make jokes that we were gay. And then we had sex and then we never spoke again.
Not all your stories ended in broken friendships, and many of your girlfriends are happy for you to dabble with other guys. Thursday, getting sexy on your computer and on your mobile. We pitted Grindr against Blender.
I'm having a really good time.
Irene Scott brought us the brave new world of future sex. the orgasmatron.
Basically, electrodes are inserted into the space between the vertebrae and the patient's spinal cord. A giant remote control allows women or their partners to turn the electrical pulses on and off, creating an instant orgasm.
And you met webcam porn star Angela White, who says business is booming.
People give me enough tips, then I'll actually do a public cum show, is what we call it. So it's where I will masturbate to orgasm, and I've done that in front of up to 6,000 people.
Wow.
Hack 1300 0555 36. Text 0439 75 7555. Triple J.
Oh, yes, we have covered some absolutely amazing things. One person is putting a question to me. What's your count, Tom? Casey from the Central Coast. And I think we're going to talk about that in a moment, because that might be one of the things that is left better unsaid, especially by me on Hack. Another person says, what about virginity and its stigma, pros and cons? That is a very interesting one that we did talk about last year on the show when we did Virgin Week on Hack, which is really interesting. Today, I'd love to talk to you about why some of these things we've covered this week are so hard to talk about in the moment. And I'd love to know what you think stops us from talking about them. What are we afraid of? What stops us asking those important questions that, if we answered them, could probably really improve our lives? Give us a call. 1300 0555 36. That's 1300 0555 36. Now, Lou Sanz and Ben Law, we started the week talking about sex and chemistry. And one of the most interesting calls we got, it was also kind of harrowing, was this girl who called in from Western Australia, who you just heard from briefly earlier, said she was breaking up with her husband the next day because the sex wasn't working. It hadn't been working for years, and she was going to break up with him on the day that happened to be Valentine's Day. So full on, and people were writing and going, oh my goodness, that girl's a bitch, that's crazy. But, you know, she didn't want to live her life with bad sexual chemistry with her partner. So, Lou, I'd love to put the first question to you. What are your thoughts on sexual chemistry, and do you think good communication can help someone work through what is quite a bad sexual chemistry?
Yeah, I think you can talk about it. Like, if she's in love with him and married, they might be able to do other things outside of the marriage sexually if the chemistry isn't working between them. It just depends on what they're getting out of it, and she clearly wants a marriage with this one man and have that good sexual
Do you think that could ever work,
to
have all the stuff that works between you and a person? And she said they had a great intellectual connection, a good emotional connection, and then go and have that sexual connection with someone else. Can you really divide them like that?
I think some people can. Like, you know, I don't think I've never really had bad sexual chemistry with anyone I've been involved with. And I say that having been involved with quite a few gay men.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment, Lou.
So I just kind of, I rush ahead. No, but I think it just all depends on what she wants. And I would want that with my partner. And I think it's really important.
What about you, Ben? If you had to sort of split some of those connections and you're in a situation where the sexual chemistry wasn't great with the person you really loved, do you think you could find some kind of alternative scenario, or is it a deal breaker in that relationship?
It's interesting, like when you were saying that someone had broken up with their partner because the sex wasn't working out, and people's automatic response is to say, oh, you're being such a bitch, that's awful, like it's just sex. But
well, there was a little bit more to that story because she cheated on him and had really good sex with somebody else.
Okay, well, you didn't tell us that, did you, Tom?
Well, you weren't tuning into every minute of the show, which I wouldn't expect you to.
Okay, fine. Well, you know what? Ben and I are leaving.
Slamming the door right now. Look, the thing is, when sex isn't working out in a relationship, and I think most of us who are in relationships, especially long-term relationships, know this, is that when the sex isn't great, the relationship isn't great either. I mean,
yeah, they often go hand in hand.
Exactly, and I think to make the distinction between your relationship and the love component of the relationship with a sexual component, as if it's something different, dirty, and divorced from everything else, is a really unhealthy way of looking at it. It all relates. I think one of the hardest things to do, whether you're with someone you're having a fling with or with someone you've been with for a long time, is actually telling them what you want to do in bed, because there is always a risk of embarrassment. Like maybe you don't want to be shaved down there, or maybe your partner just really loves you to have an epic bush. But to actually communicate that desire, runs risk of you being totally embarrassed.
But it's not that out there, is it? A lot of these things we're talking about are not
No.
that crazy, like a desire for pubic hair or a certain kind of intercourse or a strap-on or whatever. Why do you think we bring this fear into the room?
Because I think if you're going to say to someone, look, I am a guy with my girlfriend, and you say to your girlfriend, look, I wouldn't mind if I get played with in my butt, you have all these girls who assume automatically that you might be gay, but you actually want to do it with your female partner, like it's a completely heterosexual act, but it carries all this baggage as well. So I think a lot of our knowledge of sex, or a lot of our assumptions that we bring into it, whether it's from judgments that we've had with our friends or whether it's porn culture or whatever, to take that into the bedroom is a different thing, and it comes with, a risk of shame as well.
One person's texted in saying, sex is so hard to talk about because for most people, it's when we're at our most vulnerable, like dropping your pants and bending over in front of your doctor. I think that's a really interesting point. Thanks so much for your text, Nick. Mandy, you think religion's got a lot to do with it?
I do. I think a lot of religious and conservative groups do have a big deal to do with it. Basically, due to the fact that they do have quite a few things to say about how men and women should be treated, especially in the bedroom.
Well, it's not just about what they say now as well, Mandy. It's also about the way religion has shaped us from the past until now, even if you're not a believer. It's interesting the impact it has on our culture, right?
Yeah, I think it's so now certain rules from religion are so socially ingrained that we, even though we don't see it as religious, it's still something that has come from religion, and it is something that we are still affected by, even if you're a complete atheist or from a different religion, or that doesn't have those issues. And other conservative groups, it's not just religious groups, also have these beliefs as well that we don't even notice. That are so ingrained in society that it's almost shameful. And
I think a lot of people, Mandy, you're right, don't realise how much of a role those constructs still play in our society. Ben Law?
Well, look, I've done some research when I was working as a journalist and looking at how sex ed works across the country. And I wrote about this for News Limited, and I recently revisited that story for The Drum on the ABC. And what you actually find is a lot of sex ed around the country is run by religious groups. And I've got nothing against religion in and of itself, but when you're providing a sex education with a religious agenda, it does come encumbered with religious morals. And what I think we really need to shift towards thinking about is a sex education system that's based on ethics rather than morals. Because morals is all about good and bad, right? Ethics, I think, is about respect and are you causing anyone harm?
Yeah, it's interesting. Lou, you come from a Catholic background. How much do you think that has played a role in your sexuality?
Well, I'm a ex-Catholic schoolgirl, Tom.
So
sexy.
So, yeah, we had anal sex to avoid losing our virginity.
Is that true?
No.
Oh.
But that was the whole...
I like that story.
Well, let's pretend it's true, shall we? I think a lot of it has to do with, I know that religion is a huge part of it, but I think rejection and fear of rejection when you tell somebody what you want to do and what you enjoy. And I think that links back to the sex ed that Ben was talking about before. I remember learning sex ed when I went to high school. They put on Blue Lagoon. And that's how we learnt about it. But it was very perfunctory. Yeah, that was our...
It really surprises me the different stories I hear about how much people learn about sex in their high schools, because I went to a state public high school in country New South Wales and we got talked to about sex in Year 6 and then quite a bit in Year 7 and 8. And I thought it was quite educational, but I hear lots of other stories of people that went to schools that you'd expect to have quite high standards, but they really didn't touch on sex properly. I mean, is that really all they told you about, Lou? They put on a movie?
Well, yeah, they put on a movie and then, you learn about the birds and the bees. But no one ever says to you, sex is fun, sex feels good. If you try this, it feels good. If you try that, it feels good. No one tends to tell you that. So you have to learn all of these things yourself. And then you have to go and talk to someone else about it as well. And that's it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, I'm very proactive and I will often bring it up.
At learning or
sex? The person that I'm with. Learning. I don't put it into practice, never have, never will.
Right.
But I do like to talk about it with the people that I'm involved with. And sometimes that takes a little bit of, how do I put it, kneading the dough to try and get them to talk about what they they want as well. Because I just think when two people are together, it's intimate and you should be able to have fun and be yourself.
Now, Lou, just be careful with the metaphors because last time you started talking about tending to your garden. We've got some text coming in. One person says, as kids and teens, we're taught to be discreet and at best, and at worst, ashamed of our sexuality, and that's really hard to reprogram. Another person says it's because everyone hates being judged. Another person says, I'm a sex worker, and I find a lot of clients even find it hard to ask for what they want.
Talking about sex on Triple J.
Yeah, we are talking about sex. We have been all week, and we probably will be over the weekend. This is the final episode where we are just talking about sex on Hack, and we've covered some tricky topics, and some of them were easy to talk about, at least on the radio, and some of them really aren't in real life. We've been talking today on the show about why that is. But I want to know, are there some parts of sex in your sex life that you think are left better not talked about? Give me a call, 1300 0555 36, 1300 0555 36. And there was one topic that we, a lot of people said was probably better left unsaid, and that was talking about how many previous sexual partners you've had. Here was one interesting caller we had. What's your story? Have you ever lied about your sex count?
Yeah, I have, but it just causes massive jealousy problems, and I don't know, I can understand why girls lie about it because it just avoids an argument.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I guess, guys, I have Lou Sanz, the comedian, and Ben Law in the studio as well, a writer who's written one book called Geisha, and I guess it came out in that conversation that maybe there's not that much to gain in finding out too much about someone's sexual history. Lou, have you ever asked the question of any of your boyfriends, how many people have you slept with before?
Yeah, I have. Because when we've got nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, it's always a good one, isn't it?
To bring it up.
Bring up some old sex stories.
I've got my little list there. How do you feel about your mother, and how many sexual partners have you had?
Has it ever gotten you into a place where you feel uncomfortable?
No, not in my
Or
history.
what about when the guy has felt?
Huh?
Go on. What were you going to say?
No, it's all right. I'm not going to say it anymore.
It sounded like it was going down the wrong track. No, what about the other situation where the guys maybe got uncomfortable? Has that ever happened to you? Because we heard stories from people, especially girls, saying they didn't want to come in higher than the dude because then he would feel bad about himself.
Yeah, they tend not to ask as much as I ask.
That's what I've heard.
Because I think it's about learning about them. I'm like, what have you been up to? Who have you known? Whereas they kind of, they like to pretend that I don't have a past. And it's pretty easy to do with the right costume. But
that's an interesting one where that question comes from, because that's what I've heard from some of my friends as well, that it's often the girl in a heterosexual relationship that wants to bring it up and not the guy. The guy would rather just put it out of his mind. Now, Ben Law, you've been in a long-term relationship with your boyfriend. Do you think it's a conversation that needs to be had necessarily about how many sexual partners you've had in the past?
I don't know. It's a curious one. And as Lou was talking about that, the question that I would have for people before you ask that question is why you actually want to know. Like, do you want to know because you think there's some sort of threshold at which you become a total rented slut? Or is there another sort of low threshold where you're going out with someone that you think is completely frigid and you're going to have to break through the ice with your axe somehow?
Maybe you should give them the range beforehand and look, say, if it's not between this and this, then we better not talk about it.
Yeah, that sort of sounds like some sort of sick bingo game. Like, which number are you going to draw out?
Well, I don't do it for that reason, because I'm bad with numbers.
You want the stories, Lou.
I want the stories. I want to know what makes someone tick. I want to know what's motivated them and driven them. To me, when I'm getting to know someone, I want to know all about them. And even if that means knowing the bad stuff.
Beth is joining the conversation. Beth, have you ever asked that question?
I used to, and I used to openly share my number until I dated someone who couldn't handle it. Actually, I dated two guys who couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle it, but the funny thing was they were significantly older than me, and I would have thought that by the time you'd reached, post-puberty, you'd know what it meant to just handle the truth. It's just like what you guys have said, and can I just first of all reiterate the fact that Ben said epic bush on national radio.
He certainly did, and that will be in the promo, I promise you.
Yeah, Lou, that overdoes your cow comment. I'm sorry.
Well, next time Ben's on the show, we'll play
well.
Hey, Beth, I don't want you encouraging Lou Sanz to make ridiculous metaphors. She's already incredible at it. But, Beth, back to that situation with the guys that got weirded out by talking about the sex count. Why do you think there is that awkwardness there?
Yeah.
Why are these kind of topics so hard for us to talk about?
At the end of the day, interpersonal relationships, the way I see it, is really got to do with power play, because people like to feel it's this weird dichotomy, and it's called cognitive dissonance in psychology. But people like to feel two things at the exact same time. They like to feel as though they have absolute control, and they also like to feel as though they have absolute freedom. And I think the reason it's so excellent that we're talking about it is because at the end of the day, we all want sex. We all want to feel good. It's about time that we ask for it and let our partner know that I'm going to control you, but I'm also going to let you do exactly what you want.
That's such an interesting way of putting it, Beth, that we want both control and freedom, because that's why we sort of get torn up and tense in the middle of these situations, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's about being given permission. And if we want to be completely honest and get really cultural and historical...
Yes, we do.
Well, again, if you look at cultural evolution, and this is by no means criticising men. I don't want to come across as like some female chauvinist. But our society, our Western society, has traditionally been patriarchal. Many Asian, South American, North American, Native, even Aboriginal societies have been matriarchal. So we're now reaching this strange point in cultural evolution where we're beginning to listen to like other people's opinions. Oh, lo and behold, and fancy that, shock, horror. Someone else might have something to add to, my opinion.
Yeah.
And what's happening is we're beginning to shift the power to the point where women, I believe, are being dared to ask. I reckon it's this big, like, men are kind of pushing the boundaries to be like, oh my God, all I want for you is to ask you to sleep with me. Can you just tell me that you want me to have sex? Can we just get it out of the way so that we can just have sex and come? Like, can we just seriously, woman, just tell me what you want? That's all a guy wants. He just wants to hear what she wants. But as soon as a woman says what she wants, like you said, Lou, she might get rejected. And then that brings up a whole lot of low self-esteem, body image, low self-worth, stuff.
I'll put that to Lou Sanz. What do you make of that, Lou? Is it particularly hard for women, as Beth's saying, to be asked to, what they want and then to say it with fear that it might go down badly?
I think it's a lot to do with trust. I think the more you trust the person that you're with, the less likely you feel like you're going to be rejected. So you get a bit kind of more bolder with asking what you want. But I have been in situations where I've been asked what I want and I've said what I wanted, and I can feel the world of judgment coming down on top of me, and I just kind of go, I'm not an inflatable play toy that you can just move around. Like I'm actually involved in this situation.
I'm sure Brendan would have a view on that. He's texted in saying, Lou Sanz, he's a big fan of yours. I'm serious, she's hot. And being funny helps her too. Brendan, the creeper. You are listening to Triple J's Hack program, and one person has texted in saying, you can't take it back once you've said it. And this person is talking about sexual chemistry. If you tell your boyfriend or girlfriend that they suck in bed, they'll always know that, and they'll change their ways of how they see themselves. That's why it's so difficult to tell someone.
Sex.
Perhaps not mutual masturbation, but definitely masturbation on one end.
Subversive idea.
I feel like it kind of adds to the being in love.
Yeah, it can't be that bad.
Sex.
It was just pictures.
Once every 2 days, that's normal.
And I sit on his dick.
Talking about sex on Hack.
Yes, we are talking about sex on Hack. And in the studio, I have Ben Law. He's the author of 2 books. And Lou Sanz, who's a comedian and a rom-com writer. And we're moving on to the topic that really got people going. And this was Wednesday's topic, where we talked about straight guys having gay sexual experiences. And essentially, we're looking at why this kind of thing is kind of out in the open for women, but for men, it is such a taboo topic. And we're wondering, why is it so hard to talk about for men? And Ben Law, you're a gay man. You had to reconcile your sexuality, as would a straight man. But why do you think it is so hard for guys who do dabble in gay sex acts to be able to feel comfortable about it?
It's interesting. It's almost seen as this rite of passage with a lot of women to have a same-sex experience with another woman. And at the same time, I look at most of my gay female friends, and they've had a lot of sexual encounters and experiences with men as well. I think it's probably generally seen that women's sexuality is more fluid, perhaps. And within that, we see men's sexuality is so rigid that we don't allow anyone to sort of cross over boundaries. Like, it's funny, you know, you might think that gay guys who have come out of the closet are all sexually liberated and sexually open-minded because they are a minority group. But the amount of discrimination that goes on amongst gay men against bisexual men, like a lot of gay men don't believe bisexual men even exist, you know, like just come out of the closet already, you're obviously gay.
Well, what are your thoughts? What do you think of a guy that calls himself straight but occasionally has, you know, gay sex? Do you think he's bi? Would you put a label on it?
I don't know. It's hard to put a label on things sometimes. I mean, when Magda Szubanski came out, you know, she couldn't really quite put a label on herself either. You know, she was gay, a little bit not gay. And
so
I think
she's maybe like a 6 on the Kinsey scale, which we talked about earlier in the week.
Yeah, and I think you've got to cast your mind back to the fact that scales do exist as well, and that, you know, your sexual repertoire can and should be allowed to be diverse. You know, we talk about a balanced diet. God, that's a bad metaphor in this situation. But, you know, like, why should we paint someone or tar them with a certain brush because they've chosen to go after an experience? And after that experience, they might not necessarily choose to revisit it.
Well, it seems from what people have been saying on this show that is a reality, unfortunately, that people are tarred with the brush and all the stigma that unfortunately comes with some of these labels. Now,
Big gay brush.
Big gay brush. Adam, your bisexual girlfriend couldn't handle you being with a man.
I was actually in a relationship with a woman, and she just, I came up that she'd slept with a lady, and I sort of was a bit scared of saying anything, sort of put the question out there, would they have a problem if I'd been with someone, and the shock horror that she couldn't handle it. So I didn't actually in the end up telling her that I could. And then I went around and asked all my female friends, and they sort of said no either, that they wouldn't be able to handle having a man who had been with another man.
Yeah, that's a very interesting situation, Adam. Thanks so much for the call. Now, Lou Sanz, you've got some terrifyingly relevant experience on this topic. You've actually had a number of boyfriends who've turned gay after you stopped seeing them. Would you
before
or during even?
During even.
Yeah. It's funny now, but I guess that's pretty full on. I mean, what do you think of a guy who calls himself straight that has dabbled in gay sex? Are you really cynical about that now?
To a degree, I am, and I shouldn't be. Like, that's the thing, because I actually don't. When somebody tells me that they have, I don't tend to register it. I just go, oh yeah, cool. It doesn't even equate with them being gay in my mind. But then I have been in situations where maybe I should have been a little bit more aware of what was going on. You know, your boyfriend walking in going, I just sucked the best cock, and me going, that's great. That is, look at you getting out there amongst it. You know.
Oh, you're such a supportive girlfriend.
You know, yeah, I am to a fault, unfortunately.
Well,
but
Steve has texted in saying that his wife isn't too supportive. He says, I want to try anal sex. My wife doesn't. She says I can go to an escort. I guess she's mildly supportive there. And what was it like for you, Lou, when things turned and you realised that, you know, these guys were actually heading towards being completely gay rather than, you know, I guess swinging around in the middle somewhere?
It's pretty traumatic. Like, I tried a few things. I was like, you know, you can strap me down at the front and take me from behind. But that didn't work. So I tried to keep the relationship going by being incredibly open-minded, and then just realised that I was kind of losing out. But then I've dated straight guys who have, you know, like gotten hand jobs off guys and done things like that. And I couldn't see them evolving into fully fledged gay men either. But, you know, you just never know. If someone's got a curiosity, it depends on how free they feel to explore it to its absolute conclusion.
One person's texted in saying, stop the stigma about bisexuality. It drives me effing mad. I'm not gay. I'm not half straight. I am what I am. Another person says the same bisexual prejudice in the lesbian community. That's Simone from Brisbane. And Ben, I'll put this last question to you very quickly as we wrap up. Do you think the retribution for people that are sort of indeterminate in their sexuality is almost worse sometimes than people that go one way or the other?
Yeah, because I think if you come out as gay, then you're sort of accepted and people can take on face value what you are. But if you're straight and you've had some gay experiences, no one can really handle that ambiguity. And I think that's unfair. I think for all the guys out there who love girls making out, I think there should be just as many girls who like seeing guys make out.
Yeah, Ben.
I do.
All right, Lou Sanz, thank you so much for joining us on the Shake Up today. And Ben Law, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Awesome having you both on the show. That is all we have time for. It has been an absolutely incredible week, so thank you so much for sharing all your stories. Big shout out to the Hack team, Caitlin Story, the producer, reporters Claire Aird, Sophie McNeil, John Barrington, Irene Scott, Alex Mann. Linda's up next. I'll catch you later.